video I want to talk about regulation, which is also attunement, which is also integration. So you have healing, which is to bring someone back to themselves. You have healing the body, which is to bring the body back to itself. It is cut and severed. You bring the hand back to the arm. You have healed the body. So you have healing, bringing the person, the body, back to itself, which is also integration, which is also integrity, which is also association as opposed to dissociation, which is also regulation as opposed to dysregulation. The ability to attune is the beginning of healing. And we have, I wanted to look at cultures for a moment because different cultures have different skill sets and levels of regulation, attunement, integration with different things. So the United States and several Western countries, and also I would say, for example, Japan, is unusually attuned with numbers and to some extent with ideas. There's also the regulation and the attunement and the integration with things. This gets into engineering talent. And there's the integration, regulation, and attunement of words, which intersect with mathematical and engineering talent. So there's how regulated are we, but then there's also a wide range within the culture. And so the more individualistic a culture is, the less regulation there is between the individual and the group. The more individualistic a culture is, the less regulation there is between an individual and the family. And what I want to talk about is the way that there's a particular cycle of deregulation that can go on, and it works like this. A baby is born to parents that are incapable of attuning themselves to the baby, meaning they can't attune to the size because they're in their own size. They're 5-6 feet tall. The baby is this tall. They're 150 pounds, 200 pounds. The baby is 3 pounds. So the first thing is attunement to the scale, which means that to regulate energy and thus attune and respond rather than violate. Because violation is when a relationship is broken because there's no attunement. It's the difference between a warming fire and having every bit of your skin charred. The only difference is attunement. Attunement, regulation, integration. So you have scale, you have mass, you have consciousness, the regulation of consciousness. What is it like to be an infant in this environment? Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea at all? Can you remember? Can you empathically attune? Can you emotionally attune? Can you spatially and physically attune to the scale and level of an infant? Or is it a sociopathic relationship by default due to the inability to regulate and to attune. Now, I would say that we in the West have lost the ability to regulate and attune spatially, emotionally, perceptually through the eyes of an infant. As a result, many of our infants are growing up in a dysregulated state. Now, what does this mean, and how important is this? The regulation state, the first step is to establish rapport and mirroring. This is where volume, touch, sound, taste, smell, breathing is in a synchronized state between infant and surrounding, between infant and parent, and is at a scale. So it's in synchrony, and it is at a scale that is bonding and nurturing rather than shocking, which, see, shock has the continuum of discomfort to dissociation. When deregulation happens to a level that becomes intense pain, to survive and allow the consciousness to stay present in the body, there is a dissociation with the person, with the sense, with the experience, in order that the consciousness can stay present and not collapse under the weight of distraction, overwhelm, and pain. When there's attunement and regulation, there's very little dissociation that needs to occur for an infant to bond, survive, and then start to grow. Because growth and individuation happens on this backdrop of regulation and attunement. Growth begins, and it becomes this wave where the infant in a healthy state at its speed and its level goes away and comes back, goes away and comes back, goes away and comes back. And when this is stable, it takes bigger risks. When this is volatile, the infant compensates by freezing, by refusing to grow, by dissociating, by freezing, basically. It's trying to create in itself a level of stability that in a healthy growth cycle, in a healthy environment, is provided by the parent and the stable environment. Now, if you look at the difference between a nipa hut in the Philippines 500 years ago, or a American Indian teepee 500, 600 years ago, or an Amazon tribe, if you look at the stability of the environment, the noise level, the smoke level, the noise level, the smoke level, the constancy of the noise, the constancy of the smell, the constancy of the sight, the intensity of the sight, the nature of the sight, the emotional content of the sight, how much violence, ups and downs are presented emotionally to the eyes, to the ears, to the senses, and the number of people present. And you compare that to the world of today, there is roughly between anywhere from 50 to 1,000 times more volatility in the sounds, smells, tastes, chemical loads, and chemical exposure, in the emotional content in media. Just having a TV on in the background is enough to expose an infant to a profound level of emotional cues about the volatility. Now, when this happens in a dysregulated state, where it's not attuning to the infant responds in order to grow by dissociating from the people and things in its environment. And just keeping the part that can survive in that, which is the mental tracking part. That part can to learn if there's some degree of safety. And if the lack of safety is extreme, i.e. the child is witnessing their gods and their protectors, their parents, violating one another. They're watching humans on TV killing one another. There's screams, and they're being hurt and abandoned, and pain is going up and down, and there's this chaos going on. They may completely dissociate emotionally, shut down, and focus purely on analytical patterning. And this is the dissociated state. So we produce and we create a growth cycle, a life cycle, and the state of human beings based on regulated mirroring. And another way of putting this is that the only thing that will truly grow, integrate, and develop in an individual are the things that are mirrored to them in a regulated and attuned state. Meaning that if you want a child to learn language, that it has to be in a state where it's regulated to the ears. It's not shouted so intensely that the child dissociates from hearing in order to survive, because they can't hear the words then, or so low they can't hear it, or a random frequency where one day the parent says, "World house the vey," and the next day they say, "The world has a tree," and the next day they say, "Give bats wickle." And I mean, when you have too much chaos in any dimension of consciousness, and it's erratic, it's not regulated, there's no learning. When there are constants, and the rules escalate constantly into greater and greater degrees of complexity, you have music. You have something that starts out very simple as sounds, going all the way into language as sophisticated as this video, where I'm taking you around the world, I'm taking you to different places of time, I'm taking you to different paradigms, cultures, and concepts. And if you're regulated in a similar way, if you've had that chance to learn, your consciousness is able to do all of that from a little box of someone moving their mouth far, far away, who maybe you've never met. That's the power of regulated learning. So every culture measures and regulates different things. For example, in America, we regulate GDP. We regulate and measure sciences, like how well did people comprehend, how many of our children comprehended this level of English, this level of math, this level of algebra. So we regulate and we measure, and we respond to these as if they are primarily valuable. And what we're really regulating, what we regulate most of all, is money and appearance and the implied and applied power and freedom of money and appearance. We regulate We measure and we regulate that more than we regulate kindness, more than we regulate emotions, more than we regulate just about anything else. So the thing that I'm focusing on coming in is the regulation around emotion. And there's several different areas of that. So the first level is attunement. To what degree, growing up, do we share emotional experience? Now, babies do share the mother's emotional experience and respond to it. But when the mother does not respond and share their child's emotional experience, the baby eventually dissociates from the mother's emotional experience in order to survive. Because there's a really important principle. If you have two individuals in an emotionally attuned and regulated state with the desire and skill to respond to one another's emotions, their pain, their pleasure, their loneliness, etc., but basically pain and pleasure, on a wide spectrum of emotions, you create balance is what you create. Because if I validate and feel your pain at the same level you do, and you validate and feel my pain at the same level I do, and we negotiate together in a way to create joy and well-being and to minimize pain and suffering, what we're going to have is we're going to have two circles. Anything in this circle brings me pleasure. Anything in this circle brings me pleasure. Anything in this circle brings me pain. Anything in this circle brings me pain, the other person pain. And then we have a third circle, which is of the things that bring you pleasure, here are the things that also bring me pleasure. So it's a shared pleasure. And of the things that cause me pain, these also cause me pain. And in that environment, we meet in that third sphere. And we have a sustainable relationship that is predicated on the attunement, the caring, and the empathy in the overlap of those two spheres. As soon as one person says, I do not care about how much pain you are in or how much pleasure you are in, I am going to do what I want to do. What will initially happen is the person who is still in association emotionally with the other is going to have a statistical probability of having more pain. Because because every individual is slightly different. And as soon as you have one group and individual that's saying, we are not going to regulate our behavior anymore based on what causes you pain and pleasure, we are only going to do it based on what causes us or me pain and pleasure. The pain level goes up at the one at effect because the impact doesn't stop if there's proximity. But it's a one-sided thing because this person is still regulating the emotion and action for the benefit of this group. But this group has betrayed the relationship. They have said that we are no longer as interested in the sustainability of the relationship as we are in our own experience, self-referencing. So we're going to do this, you can look at this in an example of a partnership. So you have a couple, they're attracted to one another. In order to get into relationship, let's say it's a heterosexual couple, just stereotypically. So the man, stereotypically, who wants to court the woman will regulate and need to regulate his thoughts, feelings, body to a level where the woman's pleasure goes up as a result of his impact, or she will not attune to him. She will not respond. She will not get closer. She will not allow him to get closer, because if he comes in at an intensity and a lack of regulation that lowers her experience in order to be in closer proximity, she will remove the proximity so that her well-being goes up. So to the degree that he succeeds, again in this stereotype, he will successfully regulate. And in a common pattern, he will regulate enough to copulate. He will regulate and change his sounds, his voice, his political views to a point that raises her well-being, copulate to a level that raises his well-being, and find something else more interesting to a degree that would raise his well-being, and dysregulate from her. Now, this immediately dramatically reduces her well-being, because he's no longer talking, thinking, saying, doing the things that bring her pleasure, but she's attached to it because it felt good. She wants more, but there's less. So there's a pain has been created in the gap between desire and reality. I know what it's like. I can imagine that. I can taste it. Why won't you be that way again? You're not that way. You're still not that way. And every single time you're not that way is disappointing. It's painful. Why? Why won't you be the way that brings my well-being up? But I'm not going to. Because I felt uncomfortable. Because I had to do all those things. I don't want to think that way. I don't want to move that slow. I don't want to regulate all that. That was hard work. And I've gotten a certain payoff of adrenaline and pleasure and newness and validation. And now I'm only getting some pleasure. The pleasure is down, the newness is down, the adrenaline is down. And it's no longer worth that effort for me to regulate for you into your state. And you never did adjust into my state. So I'm now on to something new and better that has the adrenaline, or that's more in alignment with me, and you're now in pain. So when one person deregulates, the first time the person kind of fishes around, come on, you can have sex with me, you can do this, come on, go back to where you were. And she moves towards him. But when he doesn't regulate to a point that brings her well-being up, her well-being goes down again. And she will stop attuning to him. She will stop regulating to him, and she will put up the wall again. Because if she doesn't, her pain will go up exponentially. Now, this sometimes gets into a vicious circle, because let's say she had early childhood trauma, which is profound deregulation. Let's say that as a result, she desperately clings or completely isolates, because regulation and attunement is what teaches growth and allows for moderation and flow on the continuum of intimacy. When what you learn is, I'm going to cram food down your face faster than you can chew it, and you better eat it. And now there's nothing because I'm watching TV and it doesn't matter whether you're hungry or not. Shut the fuck up. When you learn these extremes by highly unregulated parents, you have no template for regulation. When you learn these extremes in bonding by highly dissociative parents, you have no template as a core unconscious backdrop of how to connect. So you desperately need, or you don't need at all. It becomes then a really, really, really big deal to choose to desperately need. And if someone dissociates in that state, it can create such a trauma that you can't move on. So pain is going up exponentially in our stereotypical her. But he refuses to feel, respond, acknowledge anything about her reality because he has, in dissociating and no longer regulating emotionally, mentally, physically, and in creating a paradigm that says, for example, we have a very dissociative America, so it says, what does an American say? He says, you're an adult, which isn't actually the case if she's in a regress state. You're an adult, so I'm going to think that whether you are or not, because I don't care where you are. I care about my ideas. So you're an adult. You're free. I care again about my ideas. I'm not looking at the fact that you don't feel free at all. You're in crisis. And I don't owe you anything. That's another American idea. Who's even talking about owing? How about caring? And I'm a free person with the right to do what I want to do, which is you've got a complete package there of how to dissociate and deregulate entirely, unilaterally, abruptly. There's no regulation code written in there. We have some things that are, again, mental, like what's the decent thing to do? The decent thing to do is to give 3 days notice, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I will do the decent thing to do, regulating and attuning to the thoughts of cultural norms, but not to you. The decent thing to do for you may be to bring you to a therapist and have 3 or 4 joint sessions and help you get to a point where your conscious mind even knows what's happening and then slowly withdraw. That may be the decent thing to do for you in the place that you are. But I don't care where you are. I care about where you should be according to this magazine. And I can't feel who you are because I've dissociated from my feelings, which were dissociated from my parents. So I can't feel where you are. So you should be here. Unfortunately, you're not. Tough. You have these feelings. I can't feel any of them. Nor do I take any responsibility. I could feel, I could empathize, I could listen, I could say, well, I can't feel anything, but I trust that you're in that place, and based on that place, that sounds pretty horrible. What can I do? I could, but I'm not going to. So this is deregulation, dissociation, and what I'm emphasizing, or what I'm just drawing to attention, is that in the United States, due to a cultural history of trauma, due to cultural values that are highly dissociative and individualistic, we produce generations of people that are less regulated emotionally, less connected, less attuned, and less in sync than most cultures in history, in the 10,000 cultures or so that have been part of our global history. We are producing people, and it is cultural, And it varies by culture. Like I'm standing in a Thai hotel. The experiences I've just had with the, just to give an example. I talked about my depression with the doorman last time I was here. He greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome, Mr. Rose. Thank you so much for coming again. Your second home, welcome." So this is unusual. I've never had that happen in the United States. The smile, the sincerity. I try and help him. No, I'd like to do this for you. The smile, the level of interest, the courtesy, the bows, the cup, which is a courtesy, the patience, the laughter, the smile, the space. I have this incredible space that's about 10 times larger because there's not a boundary that I'm going to hit. It's about me. The hotel I just checked out, when will you be checking out? As opposed to, 10 minutes past your checkout, we need to charge you. When will you be checking out? So there's much more about the other. There's an attunement to the person. And there's an interest. Like if I tell the hotel I'm having a fight with my girlfriend and we can't leave right now. "Oh, is there anything you need? Oh, I'm so sorry. Not, that's on your own stuff, take it outside. It's a different level of regulation. And so if we look at this reality that we need intimacy, intimacy, what causes you pain, what causes you pleasure, and I need interest. And there's a commitment and there's a value and a vision for the relationship that is bigger than the personal focus. But the thing that I wanted to say, though, is that the more sociopathic person in any partnering will always set the tone eventually by the fact that if someone consistently causes you more pain to connect with them than not, you will burn up all your reserves until you dissociate with them to the same degree they have dissociated from you. In this way, it takes two people to have an attuned an attuned, regulated, positive, sustainable relationship. And it takes one person choosing entire self-reference or referencing a book and referencing anything other than the body, feelings, and thoughts of that person to destroy the relationship and ultimately create a sociopathic dynamic.